You mentioned in the memoir that your early knowledge of God, in fact, you say, my knowledge of God was entirely iconic. Can you
Right.
flesh that out a little bit?
Well, what I meant more than anything was that it wasn't verbal. It wasn't coming from what was being read to me. It was coming from beautiful images. It was coming from my mother taking us into church, kneeling with us at the communion rail and pointing at the tabernacle and saying, Jesus is there. Jesus, our Lord, is present in this church. You know, it was images. And we know now from studies of the brain that the brain stores information in different ways. It stores verbal image that it information that it reads, you know, in one part of the brain, and it stores images that one sees in another part of the brain. And I've been intrigued without really coming to any conclusions as to how that has influenced me as an author. Because here I am writing words, which you do with one side of your brain, but I'm really describing all the time, hyper-realistically, images which you receive with the other part of your brain. And that was one of the things I wanted to stress as a child, was that my whole worldview, my whole sense of safety, my whole sense of the beauty and the meaning of the world, and the urgency that we do something meaningful with our lives, all that came before books. It wasn't dependent with me on the catechism and on the Bible and on books. It came before, it came through that great indispensable thing which so many of us have enjoyed in our life, and that is a Catholic mother.
Yes, wonderful.
And a Catholic father, you know, because they both really contributed. But my mother was the first one. She was there during the war, and she was the first real teacher for me of what it meant to be Catholic, what it meant to be Christian, what it meant to believe in God and to feel safe with God.
And also, as you've acknowledged so often, those good Catholic nuns who really created an environment to help nurture all those things that were coming into the senses. Huh?
From the very beginning. I went to the first grade, as I said. Sister Mary Hyacinth was there. I don't know where she is today, but she was our first grade teacher, and we had nuns all the way through. We had maybe 1 or 2 lay teachers in those days, but that was a time when Catholic schools were fully staffed by nuns, and there were many priests around who came in and talked to us, you know, and visited our classrooms and gave us wonderful, wonderful, inspiring speeches all the time. And so we heard them not only in the pulpit on Sunday, we heard them in school, we heard them on the playground. We got to talk to them, we knew them, we knew our priests. And we had this whole fleet, really, of people, nuns and priests, whom I loved very, very much, and who were very much part of my childhood. And again, I've mentioned this before, and I want to mention it again, what I took for granted then is what amazes me now, and that's how dedicated they were. Their whole lives were given to taking care of us and guiding us and bringing us up Catholic. And they really lived that life. They lived it 24/7, really. You know, the Redemptorist Fathers were the priests in my parish, and they had their rectory, and there was a big community of them, and they are a religious order. Some people don't understand. Some priests belong to religious orders, and some priests do not. Some priests answer only to the bishop, as you well know. But the Redemptorists were an order, and so they were a community. And they lived in that house as a community. And the nuns, of course, were the Sisters of Mercy, and later the School Sisters of Notre Dame. And they were both absolutely wonderful organizations.
We've been blessed with them, certainly. And as a young child in Catholic school myself, one of my favorite memories of reading was a series of books called The Little World of Don Camillo by Giovanni Guareschi. I'm sure you're familiar with those.
Very familiar.
You know, you'll remember how Don Camillo would speak to Jesus on the cross.
Absolutely.
And in your memoir, you mentioned doing that yourself.
I remember those books we loved those books. We read them as a family. We went to see the movies that were made with the French comedian Fernandel, I believe, right, played Don Camillo. And I did talk to our Lord. We all did that. You went into church to talk to God. You believed He was there, and you believed He was everywhere. But the fact that He was in that tabernacle, that the real presence of Christ was in the tabernacle, was a reminder to you that God is everywhere. You know, God is everywhere. He is in every single molecule of everything that exists, but He's in that tabernacle too. And that's the reminder. That's the place where you go and you focus on Him, and you talk to Him directly. And that's where you learn to do that, so that you can then go out and you can stand on a mountaintop and you can talk to him, and you can talk to him in a valley, and you can talk to him on a crowded street and in a subway, and in the middle of a crowded streetcar on the way home at rush hour you can talk to him. But you learn, I think, in that church. And Don Camillo, one of the great things, as you pointed out, was that he would talk to Jesus on the cross, and Jesus would answer. And oddly enough, years later, I tried very hard to sell a television series in Hollywood in which a priest would go into church and talk to God about what was going on, and God would answer. And they made the pilot and completely cut out the part about God talking. My TV ventures, when it comes to religion, have not been very successful.
Sometimes real reality is hard for Hollywood. The important
I
reality.
tried to explain we had a tradition of this, but they just said, oh no, Christ can't answer from the cross. And I think eventually they pretty much almost cut out the priest talking to God altogether, so it got pretty cut down.